Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest headlines in the sport. This week, it's gorgeous George Garcia with us, as well as Matthew Wells and Nolan King. So let's get right into it. Guys, we just wrapped a busy week in MMA, and one of the most high-profile performances saw Kayla Harrison remain undefeated with another dominant victory, this time over Jenna Fabian. When Bellator featherweight champ Cris Cyborg teased the future fight, Harrison said quite bluntly, "You can't beat me." Now, it's clear Harrison is one of the best pound-for-pound female fighters in the sport, but given the competition that she's faced thus far, is it fair to think that she could hang with the most dominant names in the sport, like a Cyborg or maybe even her own teammate, Amanda Nunes? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. George, get us started.
John, I don't know if it's the pandemic or what, but when I first heard that, I was like, take it easy, because we think so much of Cyborg and Nunes. I mean, they are little gods in women's MMA, in all of MMA. They've just been so successful. They got straps. They got win streaks. They're legends, But at the same time, how many times on a Saturday you hear somebody just lay an egg when they ask them, what's next? Whatever the UFC, Bellator, fill in the blank wants. And here we have a young lady that's oozing confidence. We're just coming off the Olympics, and we know every 4 years all those Olympians, they just shine, and I think they get that extra dose of confidence because they know what it takes to be an Olympian, a two-time gold medalist too in this case. So bravo, Kayla, to go out there and say something like that. It got Cyborg's attention. She's saying, I'll make 155, which, look, I don't think that's what's going to happen, but if there's an organization out there that might send a fighter to another organization, it would be a Bellator. So let's not completely write it off. But I love it that she's saying it. She's certainly closing the gap. It's not to say that the veterans don't get better, but look, at some point you kind of just max out and peak out. And I did just call both of those ladies gods, legends. So I feel like they're there, and Kayla's closed the gap so she can get away with saying something like that. Good for you, Kayla Harrison. Now, would I pick her against either one of them? I may not just be there yet. Ask me on October 28th.
Tough to make the call right now. But hey, let's not forget, by the way, if you're going to hate on her for saying it was Cyborg that got the conversation started. So it's not Kayla's fault. Matt, what do you think? We haven't seen her against the top tier yet, but man, two-time gold medalist. What do you think? Can she hang?
Yeah, she's so dominant in everything that she does, at least when it comes to the grappling aspects. The question mark that comes when you start to mention Cris Cyborg or Amanda Nunes is how does she look on the feet compared to them? Because that's the big question mark. If Kayla's able to get a hold of them, then everything's all good for the Olympian. She's going to get in there. She's going to toss them around a little bit. Both of them are capable of working off their back, though, which could pose more problems. We haven't seen Kayla Harrison's opponents really offer much off of their backs instead of just hanging on for dear life. So those are the two biggest question marks, right? If they can keep it standing, well, we know what Amanda Nunes can do. We know what Cyborg can do. They both could just light her up on the feet, but also off of their backs. They could offer up submissions. They could offer escapes and bring the fight back to standing, which is something that we haven't seen from Kayla Harrison's opponents. And that's really the biggest question mark. It would be incredibly entertaining fights, both of them. I just wish that we could get to a place, like George said, to where promotions would allow that sort of thing. We've seen PFL allow Kayla to fight in Invicta. Would they allow her to do some sort of cross-promotional thing with Bellator and Cris Cyborg? I would hope so, but we all know the thing isn't happening with UFC and Amanda Nunes. So let's go ahead and slide that one out of our fantasy matchmaking sort of thing. I think the Cris Cyborg thing is more realistic than not.
Yeah, that's the frustrating part of it all, right? They're on 3 different banners, so the conversation isn't even worth having. But I don't know, from an athletic standpoint, Nolan, what do you think? Is this Nolan, is it premature, or does it make sense to go ahead and talk about this?
No, I think it definitely makes sense to talk about it. I mean, I kind of look at those heavier women's divisions, and there's really 3 categories of fighters. There's Amanda Nunes and kind of Cris Cyborg a little bit below her. Then there's these contenders that can compete, they can hang, which is what the question asked. And then there's everybody else. And I think Kayla Harrison has shown against everyone else that she is very dominant. And we've seen sometimes like the Jermaine Durandemes, the Felicia Spencers of the world, they win against that bottom tier pack. And when they go on to face a champion, they hang in there, they go the distance. I think Kayla's dominance is far more dominant than any sort of Felicia Spencer type. So I think she could certainly hang in there. And I like the idea of a Bellator PFL cross promotion. Seems like that's something that both parties could get behind as well.
Yeah, it's funny, man. I agree. You know, like as we said, the promotional guidelines and restrictions make it difficult to think that these fights could happen. But I don't think it's premature. I think Kayla Harrison is the real deal. If we're just talking about it from a strictly athletic perspective, I think she absolutely deserves to be in the conversation. I'm excited to see what happens at the end of this season. Does PFL make the play and pay the big bucks to keep her around, or does she become a high-priced free agent? We'll see how it all plays out. First, I guess she's got to try and claim that $1 million in October. We guys at UFC on ESPN 29, Jared Cannonier picked up a big win over the durable Kelvin Gastelum. Now, afterward, Cannonier said he believes he's deserving of a title shot next, but he'd also consider competing in a #1 contender fight if he was promised a title shot with a win. So what's the right move here for Cannonier, who is an absolute specimen of an athlete, but is also 37 years old, by the way, so it's not like he can just wait forever. What's the right next move? So many big fights happening in middleweight right now. What should he do? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. Matt, you get it started.
I think the right move for him is that #1 contender fight. I don't like the idea of him jumping right back into another title fight, considering, just his position right now and how the division is shaking out. I would like to see him step in against the winner of Paulo Costa versus Marvin Vettori. That one takes place towards the end of October, so it's a little bit of ways away. Hopefully for him, considering, he's broke and he needs to fight, that the winner of that emerges unscathed so they can schedule that one quickly. But I like the idea of that matchup being the next one for him. That way you can have a true #1 contender fight, and then the winner of that obviously would be undeniable for that next shot at Israel Adesanya. We're approaching this area in the middleweight division right now where Izzy's kind of running away with things. So, contenders kind of have to build themselves up. It's either that or we're just going to start having these fights where Izzy is just taking on guys where we know what's going to happen. And I don't like that idea. I want a solid #1 contender. And I think Jared Cannonier needs to be in that sort of fight next to really drive home that, yeah, I'm deserving of this.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Because especially if Costa wins that fight, I don't want to take away from Vettori. I mean, maybe Vettori really would be a true #1 contender if he wins. But if Costa wins, heck, that's the fight we were supposed to get anyway. But I think that would be a very clear #1 contender fight. But as you said, it's not happening till the end of October. So maybe that factors into things a little bit as well. Nolan, what say you? What's the right move here?
I think timing's key, right? And Jared Cannonier said he wants to get back in there by the end of this year, early next year. And, when you have when he just stepped in the cage last week, you have a middleweight fight coming up here in a couple weeks between Derek Brunson and Darren Till. So I kind of like the winner of that facing Jared Cannonier. I know maybe Brunson, if Brunson walks through Till or defeats him, that's maybe more of a sexy fight for Cannonier just in terms of getting a boost, something that will really get him towards that title, because Derek Brunson is on a quiet run right now. And I know the other fight that Matt mentioned was Vettori versus Costa, but those guys just had their title shots. They need to rebound. They need to get back in the win column and get some momentum. Brunson's going to have a lot of momentum if he gets through Till. I mean, he's going to have as good of an argument as anybody to kind of be at the top of that division. So Jared Cannonier versus Derek Brunson or Darren Till at the end of this year, early next year, I think would be one that would make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, you talk about timing, and that makes sense, right? Because, again, that scares me to wait around till October. What happens by then? What if that fight doesn't end up happening between Costa and Vettori? So, I don't know. Listen, there's other things you could do. You could sign yourself up for a replacement situation. Say, hey, I'll be there whenever Adesanya and Whitaker are going to fight. We don't even know where that is yet. Maybe, knock on wood, something could happen. You could slide your way in. I mean, I don't know. George, what do you think? Should he book something? Should he sit around and wait? What's the move here?
Well, my colleagues did an excellent job of covering, everything thoroughly. So I'm just going to grasp at some things here. Like, I like what Matt said about Costa and Vettori, but they've also had 2 shots at Israel Adesanya. So is Israel Adesanya going to look at the winner of that fight versus Cannonier as something that really interests him too much? Or Izzy could be more looking at Brunson, who's got his win streak, and Darren Till, who he's had great exchanges with. And I believe he pretty much kind of respects his game. I think there's a little bit more of a spotlight on that fight. So I would guide Cannonier more towards the winner of that fight. Plus, it's closer to his timeline, so I think it gets him closer to December if the winner of Brunson and Till could also turn it around. Now, there's not a bad choice because all 4 of those middleweights are badasses, but that's where I would lean. However, there was something you asked, John, and you said something else. And I remember hearing Cannonier said, I'm broke. And granted, he had just gone through 25 minutes, so he'd probably laugh at what I'm about to say. But doesn't Paul Craig need an opponent with Gustafsson falling out? We're like, 12 days away? Can he turn it around? That's an extra 20 pounds that he would not have to cut. He's been a light heavyweight. He's been a heavyweight. The UFC loves it when you scratch their back. Maybe get a quick payday. As long as it doesn't hurt his middleweight stock, I think he should do it.
I'm just going to sit here with my eyes wide open. That's a crazy idea, but I like it, man. He could get a paycheck and step into a big situation. George, that is absolutely nuts, but I'm not ruling it out. Otherwise, I like the idea of Brunson Till as well, just for what you guys said, the timing of it. Don't wait. Don't sit around and wait any longer. Certainly, it's going to be a big fight for him one way or the other, so we'll see how that plays out. Guys, outside of the main event at UFC on ESPN 29, it also featured a key flyweight matchup with Alexandre Pantoja scoring a submission win over Brandon Royval and then immediately making case for a flyweight title shot with Brandon Moreno, who was in the building right there at the UFC Apex. Now, we know Pantoja has a couple of wins over Moreno, but there are some cases to be made against him. Davison Figueiredo, Askar Askarov, they have some cases to why they think should be in there. They both believe they should be ahead. You got Cody Garbrandt, who's got a big fight lined up. He thinks he might be able to jump ahead of everybody with his star power, the ratings draw that he is. So what makes sense for the Assassin Baby right now? Is this Pantoja's fight right now, or do one of those other options make more sense? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock, and Nolan, you get us started on this one.
I think it has to be Pantoja, and this isn't just recency bias. I mean, the man has 2 wins over Brandon Moreno. I'm sure it's a fight that Brandon will want back, and in a world where styles create fights, who knows? Maybe Pantoja just has his number. He has the secret recipe to defeat Brandon Moreno in ways that other guys can't. So I like that option. I think Askar Askarov has done a lot. He's done probably enough, except for one thing. He missed weight his last fight. He weighed in 127 pounds. I don't like the idea of giving guys title shots off of weight misses. I think it just sets a bad precedent. Maybe if you were in a division where there weren't other options or there was somebody that was a really clear-cut #1 contender, then sure, maybe you can make an exception. But to me, I look at a title eliminator like a title fight. If Askarov's last fight was a title eliminator, he should have made weight, So now he has to take a sidestep. He has to fight again in a title eliminator situation, maybe against Davison Figueiredo. Step to the side, let Pantoja versus Moreno 3 happen, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but that's a fair criticism for Askarov, right? You miss weight. I mean, you're not exactly showing that you can't make it. But I will say it hasn't been like a pattern of behavior for him. If it was a guy that had missed frequently, then you just absolutely have to rule him out. Here, I think you can at least have the discussion because, man, he has been on a great roll. But, of course, man, those 2 wins in the back pocket of Pantoja, they sure do make a nice case. So, George, what do you think? What's the next play right here for Moreno?
Us Mexicans, we have this expression and this look we give you when we don't want to hear what you're saying. And that's, it's simple, but it's effective. And I did not see Brandon Moreno doing that on Saturday. He was attentive. He was looking. He was, feeling what Pantoja had to say. He also had this look like, yeah, I remember those 2 losses. I want to get one of those back. So honestly, I think Pantoja did the right thing to reflect on those, bring them up, and to throw those out there. And with Askarov having that recent surgery, he himself said December is when he would be ready. And Figueiredo, look, I love me some Fig. He's awesome. But come on, what is this, 2006, Arlovsky and Sylvia? We don't need to see 3 fights that close together. Fig, unfortunately, he's going to have to get himself a win and then get back in the mix. The scary name, though, is Cody Garbrandt. That guy is star power. He's a former champion. And if he can take care of business with Kai Kara-France, I'm not saying he is, but that's the one Pantoja has to look out for. So I think Pantoja has to poke and prod and continue coming at Moreno because Moreno was interested. I think they can make that one happen. And I think they can make it happen pretty quickly.
It's funny. I was sitting inside the Apex right next to Moreno, and you're dead right. He was paying attention. He was giving respect. But I sure noticed that when Pantoja kept saying December, he wasn't giving him any answer. He wasn't signing up for it just yet. So, Matt, what do you think? I mean, is Pantoja the clear-cut winner here to get this Brandon Moreno sweepstakes, or any of those other guys that have a real case?
No, it's got to be Pantoja for me. And I like the idea of him being the guy that's beaten Moreno twice already. So that could be something to add to the legacy of Brandon Moreno early on. You're already the first champion for Mexico, right? Okay, well, I'm going to come out and I'm going to beat the guy that beat me twice. All right. That would just be legacy building, like just create this whole narrative of this guy is really a different type of fighter now than what he was when he faced him before. So that would be an intriguing storyline going into that fight. It would just add to the interest of the bout itself. I love the points that you guys made about Askarov missing weight. I 100% agree with that. Like, you can't give a guy a title shot after missing weight like that. And the same thing kind of goes for me when it comes to Cody Garbrandt as well. Because he missed weight for his weight. No, he's never weighed in at 125 before in the UFC. So you can't give him a title shot at 125 without having a fight there. I'm very much one of those type of guys. Show me you can make the weight first. We're going to see that very soon. But yeah, for me, it's Pantoja Moreno right off the bat. Let's go ahead and do that. Let him see if he can get that win back.
sense just a touch of sarcasm there, Matt Wells. But I tell you what, I like the idea. You're right, man. It would paint Moreno as the underdog, right? I mean, here's this new champion that people already love. You can make him even more the underdog of going in there against Pantoja, the guy that beat him twice. And if he can win, man, wouldn't that just boost the star power even more? Crazy to see the ride that guy's on. Or does Pantoja just have his number? We'll see. Guys, perhaps one of the most surprising moments of this past week was Khabib Nurmagomedov coming out with criticism of a fellow former UFC champion, Jose Aldo, putting off any type of discussion that the 34-year-old Brazilian was enjoying a second peak of his career. Now, Conor McGregor sure took exception to the evaluation, but, Conor McGregor takes exception to a lot of things these days. So what say you about what Khabib Nurmagomedov said? Fair or foul here? George, 4 minutes on the clock. You get us started.
It just was unlike what Khabib has been like lately. Khabib has a lot of respect to those that set the building blocks for him to succeed, and it just, I don't know. Now, I get it. He was probably this had something to do with the fact that Peter Yan, fellow Russian, so maybe it had something to do with, giving the brother from Russia some love. But if you recall, back in 2018, Khabib Nurmagomedov defended his title against the guy that only had a two-fight win streak, who was a former champion in Conor McGregor. So, I mean, what's so unusual about Jose Aldo having a 2-fight win streak, former champion? He's coming off a win. And to tell you the truth, it's not like Aldo said it's title shot or pass. I mean, he actually has warmed the TJ Dillashaw, which would be a third fight. So I thought Aldo took the right steps. I think Khabib was maybe a little bit off there. So I guess I would lean towards foul there. And then as far as McGregor chiming in, look, McGregor's going to chime in anytime Khabib says, anything that has to do with, a contrary look. But I think Conor McGregor's just bored. I think if McGregor didn't have a broken leg at this point, he probably just would have looked past that particular tweet. But yeah, I guess I would lean towards foul.
Yeah, I think what you said was kind of the most surprising. It just seemed out of character for Khabib, right? I mean, this isn't something that you normally see from him. And I kind of understand what he's saying. He's saying, praise Aldo for where he's at, but don't think he can be where he was at his career. It just seemed kind of weird to do it. So, Matt, what do you think? Fair or foul here on Khabib?
It's tough for me because, like, when Khabib says anything, he always says it with the most stoic expression ever. And it's like, I don't know if I'm taking this as a slight dig or like a straight up disrespect. I don't know which way to take it, but I think the criticism is fair. If that's his opinion, he can bring it that way if he wants to. But I'm still very much on the side of Jose Aldo. Still got a lot left in the tank to where he can become a champion again. I still believe he's capable of that. I do like the idea of a Khabib who is now retired, who stepped away from the game early, undefeated. You really can't say anything bad about his performances. So if he wants to go on podcasts and shows and just start talking trash about people, go ahead and do it. And I like the idea of it being this deadpan sort of like, I can't really decipher it properly. Like, that just adds to the intrigue for me. Like, does he really not like this guy? Or is he just kind of giving an opinion? I don't know, but I'm here for it. So it's fair for me.
I think the great closing quote in the piece that we wrote about it was that Khabib was just like, hey, you're a journalist, I'm fighter, I'm right. You can make the case, but you're wrong, I'm right. That was fantastic. So you're right. Maybe Khabib's doing a heel turn here in his post-fighting days. Nolan, what do you think? Fair or foul on what Khabib said about Aldo?
I think it was mostly fair, but it kind of turned foul. I know that's a wishy-washy answer, but I think the criticism is fine. I think he could say, hey, Aldo's not on the second peak. He's not fighting at the championship level. Look at who he's beaten. But he kind of lost me when he started comparing him to Conor, because the criticism that he laid out for Conor was like, oh, he's a businessman. And I think he said when you saw Aldo kind of curl up and took those shots from Peter Yan, like, it almost made it sound like he was saying that Aldo didn't want to be in there, or that Aldo was just fighting for money, which I guess is where it kind of turns foul to me. I think it's fine to come out and give honest answers. I think that's something we've always appreciated from Khabib, is his honesty, his bluntness, is almost in a comedic way. So I have no problem there. I just think it was kind of odd because he's usually a pretty respectful character unless somebody steps on his toes, and then you're doomed. But to me, like, it was just kind of out of character. And then that one criticism too, I thought was a bit unfair, saying Aldo, is kind of like McGregor in that he's a businessman. I thought that was odd.
Yeah, I'm siding with you on that one. Overall, I thought the comments were fine. I think there's nothing wrong with saying that once a guy reaches his peak, that's just the peak. You don't re-peak, 5 years down the road. But that part, especially about him being a businessman, when we know exactly what the reference is there, I just didn't get that one either. So I'm kind of like you. Maybe it's wishy-washy, but I think it's fair with a little bit of foul in there. Hey guys, it's another busy weekend in the sport. It's a particularly good one in the featherweight division. On Friday, PFL hosts Brendan Lane versus Movlid Khabib, and on those two have a combined career record of, get this, guys, 38-3-1 between the two of them. That's pretty impressive. Meanwhile, on Saturday, it's a striker's delight with Edson Barboza versus Giga Chikadze. Tell me, which of these fights do you find to be the most intriguing matchup of the weekend and why you find it that way? Or out of those cards and everything else that's happening, do you see another option on the table for the most intriguing matchup of the weekend? We'll do a speed round on this. We'll just put 2 minutes on the clock. Matt, get us started.
There are a ton of fights to love this weekend, but for me, it's not a main event of any of the cards. It's the return of Kevin Lee coming back to fight against Daniel Rodriguez. Sorry, his name escaped me there for a second. That is an intriguing fight for me. I love Kevin Lee. I've loved following his career. That's the fight for me because I want to see how he rebounds off of that loss to the now champ Charles Oliveira. So that's the one that's the most intriguing for me. Although fantastic fights across the board.
Yeah, no question about it. Not the fight we thought we were going to get with Lee, but still an intriguing one nonetheless. The UFC found a good replacement there. Nolan, what about you? What's piquing your interest this weekend?
Leg kicks, man. That main event at UFC on ESPN 30, Edson Barboza, Giga Chikadze. It's very intriguing to me. I mean, Edson, we're used to him taking on tough fights. If you look at that man's resume over the past few years, straight killers, So always excited to see him. Giga finally getting that big name matchup that he's been looking for. I know he beat Cub Swanson, but perhaps Edson's a little bit step up from Cub right now in terms of his career. So I can't wait to see the kicks that are thrown, the violence that ensues, and both men hopefully getting tested.
Yeah, it's a great fight. You love Chikadze finally getting his chance, and you love a veteran like Barboza giving a guy a chance, right? Sometimes guys are afraid to fight down a little bit, see the new generation. He's willing to give it. I like that from both guys. George, what about you? What are you being looking at?
I'm locked in on Name versus Movlid Khabib at PFL. It's the main event. I think Name is a tremendous story. Fellow Manchester United fan. No, but seriously, that last fight he had against Tyler Diamond was just two guys going at it, man. Slobber knocker, hard stopper, nail biter, whatever you want to call it. That was it. So to see him now in a position to fight for $1 million prize, I was locked in. But man, as soon as Nolan started bringing up them leg kicks, I can't lie. On Saturday night, I am going to be popcorn and beer and pizza ready for Chikadze versus Barboza. Human highlight films, both of them. But don't also sleep on Jenkins and Wade, two wrestlers who I think have no interest in wrestling. I think they're going to be slinging.
No question about it. PFL's got a great card. That UFC main event is fantastic. We got some great fights lined up for the weekend, so I'm pretty stoked for it. And guys, the fun doesn't end on Saturday. Sunday night, it's the fight the world has been waiting for. It's Jake Paul versus Tyron Woodley. They're stepping into the squared circle in Cleveland for the latest and an increasingly growing number of these featured boxing matches, whatever you want to call them. Celebrity boxing, I don't know what you call it. Anyway, you can't say you won't. You might say you're not going to watch it, but you can't say you don't want to know what's happening. Of course you want to know how this thing all plays out. So tell me, Monday morning, what are we going to be talking about in the wake of this fight? We'll put another 2 minutes on the clock in a speed round. Nolan, get us started.
I think we're going to be talking about Jake Paul making the combat sports world sad again and just starting over again, starting to build, starting the discussion. Who does he fight next? What's, out of the who on his hit list is he going to fight? Is it going to be somebody off that? I just think right now, athletically, he's at a point in his athletic career, if you want to call it that, where he's going to be a little bit too much for Woodley. I think Woodley's decline has been pretty evident. He's definitely a better fighter than Ben Askren, or a better boxer, I should say. But I think Jake Paul, I just have that feeling that combat sports fans are going to be let down.
Oh, Nolan, breaking my heart. Let me wipe this tear away from my eye, man. Listen, no, there's no doubt these Paul brothers are for real, but come on, we want to see one for the MMA guys. George, what do you think? What are we going to be talking about on Monday?
I agreed with Nolan on a couple of these other segments, but not this one. I'm going the opposite. I got to believe in my MMA brother, Tyron Woodley. I think he's going to get it done. Of course, the decline, I've seen it in MMA. I mean, he would tell you that, but this is something different. And see, Jake Paul hasn't faced anyone that I think he feared, honestly. And I think with Tyron Woodley, this is different. I think he is cognizant of the hands that Woodley has. So it's going to be different. He's not going to be able to get in his head like I think he's gotten in some of his previous opponents, because it's not like he got in Ben Askren's head, but then he did do the job, on fight night. But I think it's going to be different. I think Woodley also knows this is no excuse. There was no wrestling. There was no strength and conditioning or all that other stuff that hampers the older, the aging fighters. It's just time to throw, baby. Get it done, Woodley.
Let's hope he goes out there and pulls the trigger, makes it exciting. Matt, what do you think? What's going to be the headlines on Monday?
It's either going to be Tyron Woodley, represents for the world of MMA and combat sports sanity, or we have a Paul brother and a McGregor fight on the horizon next year at some point. That's one of the two options. Hopefully Woodley emerges victorious and, can hit the reset button on these crazy YouTube combat sports feature bouts. Like you said, we don't know what to really call these things, but everything says Tyron Woodley should win this fight. So I'm going with hopefully sanity in this case.
I know we're not supposed to have a cheering interest as journalists, but this isn't MMA. This is boxing, right? I don't cover boxing, so I can have a cheering interest. I'm going for the MMA guys. I'm telling you what these Paul brothers are for real. And I got to say, I don't know how long this boxing thing is going to continue lasting, but it's been a pretty wild ride, man. These stories do get kind of fun. As maddening as they are with the social media that goes on ahead of them, it's actually fun kind of covering the circus from time to time. So listen, busy weekend, guys. UFC, PFL, LFA, Invicta, this crazy boxing match. There's going to be some headlines. And we'll talk about it all next week on Spinning Back.